So Indian philosophy is a commonly misunderstood thing, and there is generally two opinions that I find on it. One, that it entirely consists of non-dual spiritualism that focuses on unity, and the other that it is a heretical pagan falsity. Both of these, as you might expect, are a little bit oversimplifications. Um, so let's start off with a bit of the history of Indian philosophy. There is, well, two common theories that you'll hear about it. One of them is the Aryan theory, which essentially believes that it is the philosophy that resulted from the religion and the culture of the invading Aryans into India after the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization. The other believes that it is domestic, coming, or either that the Aryans originated it and that they were domestically from it. But typically, you'll hear that side focus on the idea that the Indus Valley was in Hindu. Now, my personal theory is actually somewhat different than this, and I have an interesting model that I will show on screen, which essentially is a sort of dual origin theory, where Aryan culture mixed with the Aryan migrations during the transfer, which has now been shown to be slow, of the Indus Valley civilization to the what we call today uh, early pre-classical India. Um, there was a mix between local and foreign cultures, but it was mainly local, I do believe. So, from this historical perspective, you can obviously see various philosophies here, and these philosophies are generally grouped into those that accept the Veda, i.e., Ashteka or Orthodox, and those that don't accept the Vedas, or Nastika. Um, there is often 10 or 11 of these that you'll commonly see. These are the Ashteka, which is Samkya, Vaisheisheika, Nyaya, Mimamasa, Vedanta, and wait, Samkya, oh no, and Yoga, of course. Which I will cover each of these in more depth later on. And then the hetero-orthodox or Nashteka ones being Jaina, Ajivik, Buddhism, Bodhidharma, and Charvak. Now, it is important to note here that not all Hindu philosophy accepts the Vedas, as the word Hindu ultimately is more of a cultural term. And in fact, there isn't really a word for the religion of the Vedic accepting peoples. When the British came to India, they didn't have a word. They oftentimes used Dharma, but that isn't exactly accurate either. For example, the Dharma Shastras are commentary on law. So in India, there's not this artificial division between religion and not. So let's start off with possibly the oldest of these, which is Samkya. So Samkya starts with a guy named Kapila, and he was born. Well, it depends who you ask, but generally people will say around 800 BC. That's, I personally believe, around then too. He wrote a group of sutras, and sutras are sort of short, logical, concise statements, um, called the Samkhya Sutras, which is the foundation for a lot of philosophy. It's important to note here that he had a dualistic philosophy, believing that the soul was eternal and separate from the body, and Purusha, and which was sort of matter, and Prakriti is thought. But the soul is eternal and separate and needs to be liberated by ceasing identification. Usually this is atheist. I know Lord. Now on to possibly his contemporary of Vaisheisheika. Vaisheisheika is, in short, atomism, but it's not the atomism that you think of. There is 9 elements. These include the 4 ones that we have in the West: fire, earth, water, air. but also some more interesting ones. You have time, space being elements. Then you also have mind and also Atma. Um, and Atma is a very difficult concept to explain, but in short, it is awareness. So this is Vaisheisheika. Vaisheisheika, quite an interesting philosophy, lots of empiricism um, in terms of epistemology, and lots of scientific progress. Now moving on to Nyaya. Nyaya, in short, is the Indian empirical skepticism. Nyaya literally means logic, but as a lot of the people who say today, I don't really think it's based that much off of rationalism like we would think of logic today. It's more based off of hmm, almost scientific empiricism, you might say. This was oftentimes people say prelude to our next philosophy. I'm only covering this one off because Nyaya is descended from it, which is Buddhism. Buddhism was obviously founded by the Buddha, who lived around 500 BC. He took great inspiration from Nyaya and revered nature. Buddha denied the existence of Atma, which was quite revolutionary for his time, although I think this is quite silly, but I will get to that later, um, and argued for a middle path. Next, I will cover chronologically is Mahavira's Jainism. Now, why I say Mahavira's Jaina is because that's really the only one that we have solid historical records on. A lot of people will say that he founded it. This is not exactly true. Most Jains will say that it was founded by the first Tirthankara, who lived, according to them, a very long time ago. But the modern Jainism is founded by Mahavira. It is an atheistic philosophy believing in absolute non-violence, ahimsa, and believes in an eternal soul that needs to be liberated by abstinence from karma. Next, I'm going to cover is yoga. And yoga was founded, modern yoga again, was founded by Patanjali in around 300 BC. And Patanjali, or possibly later, Patanjali was a kind of a, he took a bunch of elements from different areas. But yoga is often said to be theistic version of Samkya. This isn't completely right. Samkya is rationalistic. Yoga is much more mystical. Next is Ajivik. Ajivik is a quite old Hindu philosophy. Well, not necessarily, but it's extinct. The best story of Ajivik that I can think of is I think it was Ashok himself. The founder of Ajivik went up to him and said, "You need to stop cutting down the trees." And Ashok says, well, whatever, do what you're doing. And Ajivik says, basically argues that the trees are farming humans. And he says, look, the trees breathe the air that we breathe out. When we die, we're fertilizer for it. We spread them. It's quite humble, you could say. It does sometimes believe in an eternal soul. Sometimes. The next one that I will cover is Charvak. Charvak is the hedonist of India. He believed in absolute materialism, denied the existence of spirit, and said that people should live their lives for pleasure. That's pretty much it. Charvak was quite unlike in the West, was quite not. After this is Mimamasa, and Mimamasa, I think, was founded sometime quite a bit later in the classical age, and it focused on study of the Vedic scriptures. Next, and finally, is Vedanta, and Vedanta was founded by Shankara. Shankara was a bit of a rebel. He was born in southern India, and he completely changed the entire religious scope of northern and southern India. He reverted northern India to Hinduism, or what we would call Hinduism, which is really at that time his Advaita Vedanta. He believed again in an eternal soul, and he believed that spirit and consciousness and matter were non-dual, non-separate, but that one needs to stop perceiving Maya, illusion, in order to achieve enlightenment. He differed from Mimamasa in that he believed in rationalism, and differed from some other philosophies that he was very much a theist. There was other Vedantics such as Madhva, who was dualistic, but in short, Vedanta is a rational, mystical exploration of the Vedas.